HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Vain Pursuit by Charlotte Macleod, read by John Mclain.
Chapter 1. Hey, you kid! Get the hell down off that cannon! Dr. Helen Shandy ignored the yell, even though it came straight from the bullhorn throat of Lumpkinton Chief of Police Wilbur J. Olson. She merely wriggled her new pink sneakers into a more secure stance atop the Civil War relic across from the soap factory, made sure her telephoto lens was on tight, double-checked her focus, squinted into her viewfinder, and clicked her shutter. Olson yelled again. Helen clicked some more. Not until the chief slammed open the door of his cruiser and started trying to squeeze his fat legs out from under the steering wheel did she slip the expensive camera into its carrying case and swing herself to the ground. "I'm sorry, Chief Olson, but I absolutely had to catch the Soapworks weather vane against that magnificent sunset before the sky changed. This one's considered to be Praxiteles Lumpkin's masterpiece, you know." And so it well deserved to be deemed. The hand-wrought copper silhouette, verdigrised from time and soap fumes, depicted a lanky man sitting in a round washtub. One skinny leg stuck out over the rim. His right hand clasped a long-handled brush with which he was scrubbing his back. The left hand was raised in a gesture of triumph, clutching a small oblong object intended to represent a bar of Lumpkin soap. Some townsfolk considered the weather vane nothing more than a fairly clean joke. Others thought it was marvelous. Chief Olson clearly didn't give two hoots for the itinerant weather vane artist's chef-d'oeuvre, or for Helen's explanation either. He began working his legs back into the cruiser. "Aren't you Professor Shandy's wife? I thought you worked in the library over at the college." "Yes, that's right. I'm doing this for our files. Also for a pamphlet we're helping the Balaclava County Historical Society assemble, as the result of a request from the Smithsonian. The society doesn't have the resources to collect the data, but we do, and I'm it, so to speak. Praxiteles offers a fascinating field for research because he's left such an impressive body of work and has never been properly documented before. Unless you count a few snapshots Knut Lumpkin's grandmother took with a folding Kodak," Helen added fairly. "They didn't come out awfully well." Chief Olson showed no interest in counting Knut Lumpkin's grandmother's snapshots. "Huh. So that's what they're paying you for? Some women would be home about now, getting their husband's supper on the table, and they wouldn't have to write a cookbook to get it ready either." He curved his pouty lips into a mean little smile, to show Helen he'd been joking, then resumed his customary scowl. "You looked like a kid up there." The remark sounded like an accusation, but Helen decided she might as well annoy the old tub of lard further by taking it as a compliment. "Why, thank you, Chief Olson. I'm sure you know better now that you've seen my face." The curator of the Buggins collection at Balaclava Agricultural College, to give Helen her proper title, was a remarkably pretty woman. Her petite figure, blonde curls, pink sweatshirt, and blue jeans could have fooled a sharper eye than Olson's. To irk him further, she added, "Praxiteles was a great-nephew of Fortitude Lumpkin, who married Druella Buggins, as you doubtless know." Chief Olson most likely hadn't known, and clearly couldn't have cared less, though he wasn't quite dumb enough to say so to Mrs. Shandy. "Cussed kids are always climbing around on that cannon," he growled. "They fall and hurt themselves, and their mothers come putting the blame on me." "I suppose a lot of the parents work in the factory." Helen nodded toward the 3-story expanse of red sandstone and dirty windows squatting across the road from the grassy triangle on which the cannon sat. Both had been here since the late 1860s, the cannon's muzzle pointing straight toward the factory's tallow room, within whose vats thousands upon thousands of beeves had over the years rendered up their fat to be converted by the alchemy of potash and perfume into Lumpkin's lily white for lovely young ladies, Lumpkin's latherite for dirty old men, Lumpkin's launderite for the washing you love to hang, and no doubt a good many more subtle saponifications, of which Helen knew nothing. She did know, of course, that this vast enterprise had grown from the pans of lye soap Druella Buggins Lumpkin had concocted long ago, from kitchen fat and wood ashes, and which Druella's husband, Fortitude, had peddled among the surrounding hamlets out of saddlebags slung across the rump of his trusty mare, Bernia. She knew how the tiny clearing Fortitude had hacked out of the wilderness to make a home for his bride had burgeoned into a village, and then to a town, all of it built, metaphorically speaking, on Druella's lye soap. Much of Lumpkinton was still farms, some of it was bedroom for the nearby city of Claviton, but the soapworks here in Lumpkin Upper Mills was its major industry. Helen wondered how soon the picture might change. Some of the younger firebrands, notably one Brinkley Swope, head man among the Cesses, were complaining that the outmoded factory wouldn't be operating much longer if something wasn't done soon to improve its facilities and manufacturing methods. Only 2 weeks ago, Brinkley's brother, Cronkite, demon reporter of the Balaclava County Fane and Pennon, had published a feature story about the slippage of the Lumpkin works in the world soap market. Feeling was said to be running as high as feeling ever got to run in so stodgy a place as Lumpkinton. However, Helen Shandy noticed no sign of impending riot as she bade Chief Olson farewell and headed her own car back toward the old Horsefall place, where she'd left her husband in amiable conclave with their friend Henny. Hengist Horsefall, to give him his proper name, not that anybody ever used it, was well into his 80s. Peter, who wouldn't see 60 for a while yet, appeared a mere stripling beside him. The two were sitting out on the front porch, contemplating the sunset and stoking themselves up for an evening meal with preprandial sips of Henny's Aunt Hilda's damson gin, while Henny's nephews Eddie and Ralph finished up the chores with the help of various offspring. Inside the house, nieces-in-law Marie and Jolene, a few greats, and a great-great or two, were getting supper. The Shandys hadn't meant to stay. They'd driven over to Lumpkin Corners to take pictures of some of Praxiteles Lumpkin's other artifacts, including a particularly interesting one owned by Henny himself, that depicted a rooster standing on a pig's back. The Horsefalls, one and all, had insisted the Shandy take potluck with them, so Peter had remained as willing hostage, while Helen, who'd saved the best till last, hoping for a fine sunset, had gone off alone to Lumpkin Upper Mills to complete her day's agenda. It was largely thanks to Peter that the Horsefalls still owned the family farm. It had been Helen who'd helped them sell some of their antiques for enough money to build on a big wing and house the whole clan in a style they'd never expected to enjoy. The Horsefalls could have sold the weather vane too, and wound up with sufficient wealth to build themselves a mansion, but they didn't need a mansion. They liked the old place the way it was, and they were all fond of the pig and rooster, so here they were, and there it was going to stay, and Helen Shandy was glad. She kissed her husband, was hugged by several Horsefalls, including Henny, who wasn't about to pass up the chance to embrace a pretty woman when he might never get another, and accepted a tot of damson gin. "Well, how'd you make out at the soapworks?" Jolene asked her. "Did you get your pictures?" "I hope so," Helen replied. "The weather vane looked pretty good in the viewfinder anyway, but I almost wound up in jail for taking them." "What do you mean? Did Soapy Snell come out and start throwing his weight around as usual?" "No, What happened was that I'd climbed up on that old cannon in the middle of the road in order to boost myself high enough to get a decent shot. Chief Olson happened along in his cruiser just as I was ready to shoot and took umbrage. He thought I was a kid," Helen added rather smugly. "Olson hates kids," grunted young Ralph, who counted among the grown-ups now that he was a student at Balaclava. "And he's really got a thing about that cannon," added Ralph's sister Hilary, a beautiful brunette of about 15 and a half. "You'd think he was General Grant or somebody." She giggled. "Brinkley Swope's crazy about the cannon, too. Cronkite says Brink's planning to sneak out some dark night when nobody's looking and shoot it off."
"Blow hisself to hell and gone if he tries," snorted Henny. "That damn cannon's probably rusted out so bad inside it'd bust its barrel if Brink so much as stood near it and let off a real good—"
"Uncle Henny," snapped Jolene.
"I was going to say sneeze."
The octogenarian's washed-out blue eyes were as innocent as a newborn lamb's.
"Quit picking on me, can't you?"
"That cannon's not rusted," said Eddie. "The GAR used to keep it swabbed out long as there was any of 'em left alive. Then the VFW and the American Legion took over. Anyways, I don't suppose Brinkley meant to stuff the damn thing full of grape shot. A little black powder wouldn't hurt any. You can never tell what those Swope boys will do. And by the way, Hilly," her Aunt Marie added with a lift of the eyebrows, "what were you doing talking to Cronkite? Isn't he a little bit old for you?" "He's 25. 9 years isn't so much difference." 9.5, surely. "Anyway, I think older men are more interesting." "Oh, you do you?" said her mother. "Seems to me last week you were finding Tommy Lomax pretty interesting, and he's not even 15 yet. You listen to me, young lady. If I ever catch you on that motorbike of Cronkite's, there'll be some fur flying around here, and I don't mean maybe." "Mama, for goodness sake," Hilary protested. "Cronkite gave a talk Sunday night at youth group about being a reporter, and we got to ask questions afterward. I asked him one question, and he answered. Big deal. He wasn't talking to me specifically. I was just one of the gang." "Well, that's what you'd better keep on being, as far as I'm concerned. Those Swopes have a peculiar streak in 'em a yard wide, if you ask me. Now, Marie, there's a damn sight worse than the Swopes around here," said Ralph. "Huntley and Brinkley are doing all right at the soap works, and they pull their weight around town. Hunt's on the finance committee, and Brink practically runs the Lumpkinton militia. Cronk's kind of a loose wheel, I have to admit, but I guess you have to be in his kind of job. How are you making out with the weather vanes, Helen?" "Quite well, I think. I've done yours, the 2 horses on the old Lomax place, Gabe Fescue's cow kicking over the bucket, the big donkey and carrot on the Lumpkinton Town Hall, the figure of justice on the county courthouse over at Claviton, the Onward Christian Soldiers one on the Methodist church down below you, the 2 roosters and the grasshopper over in Balaclava Junction, the blacksmith at Forgery Point, and I was lucky enough to catch that lovely mare in foal on Mrs. Peavy's barn over in Hoddersville before the barn burned down." "That was an awful shame," said Eddie. "Beautiful old barn like that, been in the family since the year 1 just about. They blame the fire on wet hay smoldering in the loft, but Joe Peavy's a damn careful farmer. He swears it was set. The arson squad didn't find anything, though." "They never found the remains of the weather vane either," said Helen. "I've got my suspicions about that, but I suppose we'll never know. But anyway, counting the soap works, I'll have 9 so far, and Peter has a line on another Praxiteles way up in Maine at a forestry school, where one of his old classmates is president. It's a lumberjack felling a tree. Peter wrote asking if we could come up and take photographs. We're going to make a vacation trip of it. Peter's classes were over this week, you know, and I've taken a leave of absence from the library to work on the weather vane project. They've asked him to speak at next year's commencement. He's going to give a speech and sing Trees for an encore, aren't you, dear?" "No, I think I'll leave that out of the program. Madam, do you realize we've been imposing on these good people for upward of 4 hours? It's 9:30 and pitch dark out." "Oh, what's the hurry?" Jolene protested. "We don't get to see you that often. Here, Peter, let me head up your tea for you." "No, really, we mustn't," Helen protested. "We never intended to stay at all, and we haven't even fed our cat. Jane will be furious. This has been lovely, but we've got to scoot. Can I help clear the table first?" "With all these hired hands sitting around doing nothing? I should say not. Come on, kids, stir your stumps. Marie, how about a piece of your layer cake for Helen to take home so she won't have to think about dessert tomorrow?" "We'd love a piece," said Helen. "Not too big a one, please. Peter eats too many desserts as it is. So do I, I'm ashamed to admit." Actually, Helen wasn't more than a comfortable pound or two over the optimum weight for her delicate frame. Peter's 5'7" or 8" was pretty well upholstered, but he was of a stockier build, and much of what he packed was muscle. Internationally renowned as a horticulturist and agronomist, Professor Shandy still believed the best teaching was done out in the turnip fields, and could still outspade and outfork the burliest students in his classes. Peter, Helen, and assorted horsefalls were standing around exchanging the usual last-minute remarks when old Henny picked up his ears.
"Hark! That's the fire whistle!"
They all fell silent, counting the hoots.
6 and 3,
said Ralph.
"Gory, that means the soap works."
Then came 2 more hoots, louder and longer.
"General alarm!" yelled Eddie. "Come on, boys! See you later, Peter. We got to get down to the firehouse."
He, his brother, and 4 of the oldest sons made a beeline for the door, grabbing boots and rubber coats as they ran. Peter and Helen quit saying they must be going, and went. Already a faint whiff of smoke was drifting over the hillside.
"God, it smells like a giant barbecue,"
Peter remarked, as he steered carefully down the rocky dirt driveway. "I suppose that's the soap fat burning. I can remember a pan of grease catching fire on the wood stove at the farm when I was a kid. My cousin Gordy panicked and heaved a dipper of water on it, which only spread the flames. My grandmother laid him out in lavender afterward because she'd had to use up her whole keg of pickling salt putting out the fire." "This one's going to take more than pickling salt," Helen remarked soberly. "Look, Peter, see that red glow in the sky? We must be 3 miles from the factory. Can you imagine what it's like over there? How do you suppose it got started?" "Lord knows, but I expect it wouldn't have taken much. A mill that age would have been all wood construction, except for the brick. Get a mile or 2 of planks and beams that have been soaking in soap fat for a century or 2, and 1 spark from an electrical short circuit, or an oil-soaked cleaning rag that some damn fool left to smolder in a closet, would set the whole place off. It would be like lighting a giant tallow candle."
"But they've always been extra careful about fire hazards," Helen protested. "Mrs. Lomax told me so. Those Swope boys who work there are her nephews or something, and they tell her everything. Not that she wouldn't know anyway. You know how she is. But anyway, she says they give everybody a strict warning lecture their first day on the job. They have no smoking signs all over the place, and fire drills every few weeks. Cigarettes have to be left with the timekeeper, and anybody caught with a lighter or even a single match in his pocket gets fired on the spot."
Peter shook his head, as if to clear it. "Did she happen to mention whether they're still working double shifts?"
"I know they are. I saw the day shift going off and the night people coming on while I was taking my pictures. Darling, I know we ought to stay clear of the area, but isn't there some way we could at least find out if everybody got out all right?" Helen begged. "I don't think I can bear not to know."
"There's a place called Lookout Point over toward Lumpkin Upper Mills. It's far enough from the factory, so we won't be in the way of the engines. We ought to be able to see what's happening, and there's bound to be somebody around who will know whether there've been any casualties. Lucky we left our birdwatching glasses in the glove compartment." By the time they got to Lookout Point, the smell of the fire was enough to sting their eyes and throats, even though the wind was blowing toward the east, and they were half a mile westward. Through their field glasses they got a clear view of the burning factory down in the valley. Flames were shooting far above the building, scattering burning debris over the road, the fire trucks, and the roofs of nearby buildings. Helen saw one ember land on the cannon where she'd been standing a few hours ago. To her surprise, it set off a strange, bright fizzing flash.
"Peter, look quick. The cannon's on fire."
Can't be. No, by George, you're right. That looks to me like black powder burning. It must have been fresh, too. Powder gets damp quickly.
There certainly wasn't any when I climbed up. I made sure the cannon was clean before I risked my pink sneakers. Silly of me, I suppose, but I always feel there's something extra special about new sneakers. Oh, how ghastly. The whole roof's caving in. Can't the firemen do something?
I don't think they're even trying to save the factory. They know it's hopeless. All they can do is try to contain the fire and protect the surrounding properties.
Another of Praxiteles Lumpkin's weather vanes gone.
Helen sighed.
Both in the same week, and both by fire. You know, Peter, that's awfully strange. The one I photographed this afternoon was right in the center of that section of roof we just watched fall in, but I didn't notice it falling. Goodness knows there's plenty of light to see by, even if the smoke is so thick. Did you see it?
No, I didn't, now that you mention it.
You don't suppose some brave soul dashed up and rescued the weather vane?
I expect they were too busy rescuing themselves, Peter replied somberly. I just hope they all got out. As Peter had predicted, they weren't alone on Lookout Point. Other spectators were crowding around them, looking far more worried than excited. Peter and Helen could overhear their anxious conversation.
"There's Bob Giberson down there wetting his roof with the garden hose. If only the water pressure holds out. Oh my God, look, the porch is on. Nope, he got it out. You can damn well bet Soapy Snell's porch isn't on fire. Where is he? Can you see him anywhere? Say, mister, could we borrow your glasses a second?"
By all means. Peter handed them over. After a minute or so, the other man returned them.
"Nope, I can't see him. Probably home counting his money. Huh. Chief Olson's down there screwing up the traffic. He would be. I wanted to go help, but they wouldn't let me pass the fire line. Got engines there from Claverton and Hardersville, and everywhere. They say half the cars in the parking lot were on fire before most of the people in the factory knew what was happening. Anybody get caught inside? Clem says they all made it out but Casper Flum. Cass was in the tallow room, naturally. That seems to be where it started. Huntley Swope tried to go in after him, Clem says, but it was a solid wall of flames. Huntley's clothes were on fire when they hauled him back. I guess he's burned pretty bad. The police ambulance whooped him off to the Hardersville hospital. That'll be something for his brother to put in the paper, I reckon. Yep. And there's Kronk down there now, taking pictures and hectoring the fire chief. Where's Brinkley, I wonder? Brink's on days this week. I saw him down at Johnny's Spa just after he got off his shift. He was buying cigars for his father-in-law. They got the old man living with them now, him and Cynthia. So Cass Flum got caught in the fire. God, that's awful. Poor old bastard must have worked in that tallow room 50 years or more. Well, at least he won't be out of a job like the rest of the town. Think Soapy Snell will ever rebuild? Who knows? I don't see how they could have enough insurance on that old fire trap of a building to make up half of what it'd cost them to put up a new building at today's prices. Soapy won't give a damn. He's got plenty. Be just as well pleased to retire, I shouldn't wonder. I don't know what people are going to do if they don't rebuild. Wind up slinging hamburgers at fast food joints, I expect, or clerking in supermarkets. This is one hell of a situation, if you ask me. Boy, if we ever find out who fired that cannon. You surely don't think the cannon had anything to do with starting a fire. Hell, that old pop gun couldn't shoot a hole in a paper bag. Who says it couldn't? Sure made one hell of a bang, didn't it? We heard it clear up here to our place. The wife and I ran out to see what the hell was going on, and the tallow room was all in a blaze as if a bomb went off inside. I never saw the like before. And believe me, I never want to see it again. But you can't even aim those old cannons like the modern ones. What's to aim? The damn thing was pointed right at the tallow room window, and not more than 20 feet away. Cass could look straight into the muzzle. He used to kid about being under bombardment. But a cannonball wouldn't start a fire even if it landed plunk in one of the vats. You wouldn't use a cannonball. You'd ball up some rags around a rock or something, ram it in on top of the powder, and it'd be on fire by the time it left the cannon. Wouldn't travel far, but it wouldn't have to. Do you imagine what a wad of blazing rags would do to a vat of hot tallow? I wouldn't want to be around when it fell in, that's for sure. But who'd be fool enough to take that risk? Somebody was fool enough to fire the goddamn cannon. You can't get around that. Oh, it could have been coincidence. Maybe some kid shoved a firecracker down the barrel. Well, I expect we'll find out fast enough, if there's any of us left alive by morning. Cripes, this smoke is getting to me. I'm going back in the house.
Chapter 2. Peter and Helen had had as much as they could take, too. They drove home with the car radio on, catching emergency bulletins first from the Claviton station, then from the network. Jane Austen was waiting for them inside the house, indignant at having been left so long, notwithstanding the fact that Mary Enderbull had dropped over to open a fresh can of cat food and hold Jane's paw for a while, after Helen had telephoned from the Horsefalls. They tried to apologize, but she turned up her nose at the smell of smoked soap fat and stalked off in a huff. So they went upstairs to shower and shampoo. Once rid of the stench, they changed into clean night gear, put their stinking garments down cellar to be washed, or outdoors to be aired, as the case might be, and at last persuaded Jane to join them in front of the television set. Seeing on the screen snatches of what they'd already watched live was rather an odd experience, but it didn't last long. Caspar Flum was the big news. His death was official. The Fane and Pennon's archives had furnished a lovely picture of Mr. Flum, beaming among his tallow vats on the occasion of the factory centennial in 1972. There was a more recent shot of him accepting his 50-year service pin from the august and, needless to say, spotlessly clean hand of President Soapy Snell. Mr. Flum had been a childless widower, but the newshounds had managed to round up a sister and a couple of nephews, all of them bleary-eyed from tears or smoke or both, and none too eager to parade their grief in front of the camera. They were unanimous in agreement that tallow had been Caspar Flum's life. The sister was willing to allow that maybe perishing among his vats was the way Cass would have wanted to go, but the less inarticulate of the nephews blurted out that he'd still like to get his hands on the murdering son of a bitch who'd fired that cannon. No, he hadn't seen it fired. Nobody had, as far as he knew. But it must have been the cannon that set off the blaze, because what the hell else could it have been? It just went to confirm the Big Bang Theory, the other and presumably more studious nephew added, having at last got his Adam's apple free from his collar. The sister contributed the further information that Cass had always been a good brother to her. She'd already bought his birthday present a month ago, and what if the store wouldn't let her return it after all this time? Her voice became totally choked with tears, and the cameraman at last showed the decency to move on.
"Poor woman," Helen commented. "I don't know why they always have to go pestering the families at times like this. Let's have a spot of brandy, dear. I'm ready to drop, and so are you, but we probably won't sleep without something to settle us down."
The brandy must have worked. The pounding on their front door at 7:30 dredged them both from fathoms deep. Peter stuck his head out the window without bothering to open his eyes and yelled, "Hold your horses, I'm coming." He then held a brief wrestling match with his bathrobe, borrowed his slippers back from Jane, and went downstairs. The too early visitor was Cronkite Swope, begrimed, bedraggled, reeking like a smoldering tallow vat, and tottering from exhaustion. Peter grabbed him by the arm. "For God's sake, come in before you fall down." He steered the young reporter through to the kitchen, shoved him into a chair, and began making coffee. Want some juice?
Huh?
Here, drink this. Swope.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?